Player. I was very active with the Players Association at a tumultuous time in the history of the union, where it seemed like strikes and lockouts were a part of every season, and I enjoyed being a part. I was very close with the Players Association, meaning I was a player rep for the team, and I got very involved in that, and I became, we'll say, an advocate for maintaining and improving players' rights through the union. Towards the end of my career, the people who represented me approached me and said, when you're through playing, we have a job waiting for you. So made my last couple of years a little easier because I knew that I was going to go right into the agent business, we'll say, and I was excited to do that. I wanted to get off the field, but I still wanted to stay in baseball because I felt I had something to give back to, we'll say, the next generation of players.
Yeah, that's awesome. And once again, John Pielli here with former Major League pitcher and MLB player agent Joe Sambito. Do you remember your first experience in regards to a relationship with an agent when you were contacted for the first time as a player? Was it when you were an amateur player? Was it, around the time that you were eligible for the draft?
No.
Okay.
Back then, I got to the major leagues in 1976, and that was the first year that agents had a job because the reserve system had just been abolished, and players were permitted to become free agents, and that's when I was approached. I was in my second or third year in the major leagues before an agent approached me.
Wow. So, as far as your experience with that, you don't have to get into too many details, but did you think, as far as this being a fantastic thing to have somebody represent you and your rights at that level? Because now you're telling me, as far as beforehand, when you were signed, when you came up through the minor leagues, when you were first in the major leagues, you didn't have any of this. You were kind of still strung along what was the reserve clause, and it was gradually getting abolished.
Right. And my source of information was the team.
Yeah.
And the team gives you information, but they only give you partial information. And it takes the outsider to come in and give a player all the information to where a player can make a decision for himself. There was no reason in the past. Can we cut there? Because I've kind of lost my train of thought.
No.
We were. Remind me, we talked about. Give me your question again.
All right, this was your experience with the player agent for the first time, right. Kind of going from not having any representation to having representation, and
okay. When I was finally approached by an agent and I hired the agent, I then realized how much I didn't know, and that was important, and it gave me a comfort level. So I had someone I knew and I could trust, and I knew I'd get all of the information to make a good decision.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I tell you, one of the things I was thinking about there was we talked about off air, the guy with the player background, the guy with the legal background. Did you find more as far as just the representation okay, or was it something that you noticed, let's say, the legal knowledge from the end of the agency being the most beneficial to you?
Well, I think it was probably the legal knowledge, and then the connections that they had within the industry. And at the time, they were amongst the best at what they did.
Now, as far as the baseball player strike of 1981, it's something that I'm sure you remember pretty vividly. Now, were you involved actively with the Players Union at that point?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and one thing I remember vividly is we were on a road trip.
Yeah.
We were on a trip. We were playing the Mets in New York.
Okay.
And if I recall correctly, it was a Friday night game. And we all knew that if no agreement had been struck between the Players Union and the owners by midnight that night, that the players would officially be on strike. And that's what happened. And they left us in New York.
Wow.
Players were left to make their own arrangements to get home.
Yeah. So there was obviously the separation from the team, which was represented by the owners, and then the players, which were on their own.
That's right. Fortunately,
And-
my mom still lived up there, so
Well,
at least I had a place.
Listen,
to
I mean,
stay.
it probably, and I don't know, you may disagree with me, but obviously everything that happened with that wasn't good at the time, but
Yeah.
some of it probably sounds a little worse than it is.
Yeah.
You're left somewhere, somebody's going to get you home.
Yeah,
You
well,
ended up getting back okay.
I just thought it was kind of odd.
Yeah.
They brought us
All
up
of a
there.
sudden, you're there. You're getting ready to get on a flight to go to the next city, or a bus to go, or whatever. And you're not allowed on anymore.
That's right.
Not only you, but anybody else on your team.
Yep.
Now, once again, John Pielli here with Joe Sambito. Now, last question I want to ask you. You ended up having a successful major league career. Of course, you had the arm injury. You came back in '85 and '86, and then you finished things up. The whole mental aspect of thinking, what are you going to do with your life after baseball? Because this is one of my favorite questions to ask, former players, because everybody's going to go through it at some point in their life. Kids that are listening to the program are going to have success. They may not have success. They may get into a different way of life. But the difference between being an athlete and being something else is that if you're something else, odds are you can do that for the rest of your life until retirement. Now, retirement for a baseball player can end at 22, 30, 35, 40, but the common thing is the majority of your life, your working life, is not going to be playing baseball. How cognizant of that were you when you were playing? Not just about the transition to being an agent, but how much did you think about, all right, there's going to have to be life after baseball?
Right. Well, it's an interesting question because it changed as I got further along in my career. When I was 26, I couldn't picture myself being 35.
Yeah.
And as I got into my mid-30s, and I was post-surgery, we'll say, I realized this is not going to last forever.
Yeah.
Fortunately for me, a couple of years before I stopped playing, the people who represented me asked me to come to work for them. And so I felt, okay, there's an option for me. Something I wanted to do anyway, but I never really wanted to ask them to create a position for me. So I'm glad that they came to me first and asked me. So at least I had a plan.
Yeah, so it was a question that was partially answered before you were done playing.
Exactly. So I was fortunate as far as that goes. And I got out of baseball, and I probably just kind of kicked back and did nothing. I left All-Star break one year,
Okay.
1988, and I went home and sat for a couple of months. And then by that fall, I was out in the instruction league recruiting players.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So,
The last question I want to ask you, Joe, and I really appreciate you having some time. To the people that, let's say, you represent, or in regards to that, as an agent right now, are you as instructive to them as far as being players with the what we just talked about, that baseball isn't going to last forever? Have you had conversations with players that you represent in regards to life after baseball?
sure. Yes, but the players today are much more aware of things. They're smarter
Yeah.
than we were back in the 70s. And, there's all the information is available to them, and they all have a pretty good idea coming in. We can guide them, with some players have questions about financial planning, things like that. We don't do that. Don't claim to be a financial advisor.
But I'm sure you have the ability to lead somebody in the right direction.
What I would do is I'd give a player 3 or 4 names. I said, look,
Yeah.
our clients have given us good reports on these guys. You should interview these people as you interview your agent. And
That's awesome, and so I'll just follow up with this quick one, and then I'll let you get on with your way. From that end, being with the players, getting advice from you. Did you feel that throughout your entire career you had the right type of representation? Because you probably have so many questions as a kid. You talk about being starting your career in 1976. From that time until you had an agent, it was probably scary because a lot of the decisions you were going to have to make that you're helping players out with now were probably left for you to kind of fend for yourself.
yeah, but you got to understand, there weren't agents back prior to that.
Yeah,
You didn't know what you didn't know. You relied on the team for the information.
that's a very good point.
Whatever information you gave them or they gave you, that's the way it goes. And so we didn't. Let's just say at the time we didn't know what we were missing, and now I think we've been able to complete the circle for the current players to where they know the whole story and they know all the options, and then they're educated to where they can make the right decision for themselves.
Very true. Listen, Joe, I really appreciate you having some time. Great getting a chance to chat with you.
Okay.